So it's another episode of In Conservation with. My name is David Lindo, also known as the Urban Birder, and tonight is actually sponsored by the Diputación de Cáceres, which is a tourism board looking after the northern region, because this particular place has two regions. The northern region of Extremadura in southwest Spain, a beautiful place to go birding, and also Leica Sport Optics. So thank you very much, guys. If you're new to In Conservation with, it's all about a conversation with someone in conservation. Simple as that. And what I try to do with this is to invite people that you may not necessarily have heard of before, but they've all got something really interesting to talk about. And that is one thing I can definitely vouch for when it comes to this young lady, Kwesia X, as you call yourself. Welcome along this evening, this afternoon. Where are you and how are you?
Good evening, and thank you for having me, David. It's a pleasure to be in this space with everyone and you. I'm currently in London, Southeast London, and what was
How are you?
How are you? I'm well. I'm well, actually. I'm well. Thank you for asking. How are you?
Yeah, you know what? I'm good. I'm just continually working away as ever, but yeah, I'm good. I'm not bad at all. Doing well. We're going to learn a bit more about you in a minute, but one question I wanted to ask you first off was, we're going through this pandemic. Next 2 years now, nearly. How did it affect you?
I'd say it didn't necessarily affect me. I feel that it brought more clarity to me in the sense of being able to connect with myself and the world around me, especially being a nature enthusiast. I had more time to kind of gain that clarity with, as I said, myself and the outside world by getting out more. Even though there was restrictions in place, I was able to connect in other ways also, such as reading books, gaining more knowledge. And yeah, I feel although it's been a sad time the last few years, it's been quite a positive thing for me.
Good.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's good. Well, I think now's the time because you got a little short film just to show this film, just so that people can get a background on you, so we can talk from there. Zoomers, Kwesia is about to show us a quick 3-minute film, and the best way to view it, if you don't know, is to put yourself on speaker view so that you get the whole screen. The whole screen. Okay, so Kwesia, over to you.
Thank you.
It works so well in rehearsal.
We're here now, so I'm gonna give it a play. There's a bit of music as well. So. You know we sound back.
In and I don't need a reason. 8 p.m. and definitely dirty season. Someone's flaking a trap, but it's flake when we stack. Shit tonight got me looking like a Christmas evening. I don't care about the odds. I got this that will make it even. I'll never walk alone like my name was Steven. Shit, this ain't a race, it's a marathon.
I grew up in Deptford, an inner city area of South East London, with mum and older sister by a set of flats called Peeps Estate. In this era, my friends, neighbours and peers, we all experienced the great deal of challenge that come along with living in an area and with people who have often been neglected, excluded, marginalised. My life chaotic, often harsh, without meaning or a sense of direction or purpose. I struggled a great deal with making sense of assessment and trauma within my community. I found myself homeless, moving from sofa to sofa, and struggling with my mental health and well-being. To make matters worse, I started noticing the changes taking place in my area I once fell in love with. People started moving away as new people came in. Old chill out spots were demolished and replaced with brand new luxury high-rise apartments. Even though this is still an area, I felt wrong in the world. I later found out it was called gentrification. But after all that, a tiny spark within me allowed me to notice an opportunity when it came along. Through a local community centre, an opportunity to be a part of an expedition to travel and stay in the Peruvian Amazon rainforest came up. The expedition was arranged by the British Flora Society, and I was to be chosen and spent 3 weeks in a remote part of the jungle with no phone or contact as well. A group of people that I barely knew. But to experience the beauty of nature, there was no judgment, just life teeming up with energy and opportunity, and bonds of friendship and loyalty which strangers had to discover ways to live, work together in order to be successful. This, in many ways, is what I had experience from me. I returned back from the Amazon, I was thinking about connecting with other people, particularly young people like myself, some of whom have never had the opportunity to experience anything other than inequality and hardship. I wanted to explore if a connection with nature could touch them in a similar way it touched me. This led to the start of City Girl Nature as a way to give back to my community, to share my love and passion for the outdoors, and the belief that everyone should have the chance to be healed, to be nourished, and to live with abundance.
Getting released to my time, I'm a different kettle of fish. You might catch me in the central, he got the party done, but Tuesday I got the party lit. Bro called one of my friends on the maze and he banged his face, but I can't complain. But my man's moving wrong when I set up his maze and he's moving fake. You can ask P if I bang man's face, you can ask P if I bang man's face.
Great. Now, for those who didn't hear properly, we were talking about all the points in that trailer anyway, but you can view all of Kwesia's films. What I love about Kwesia, if I may say this now, is the fact that I came across her on Twitter. She was tagged onto me one day, and I thought, this is amazing. A young woman going out there and she's making films about going out and watching or looking for nature in urban areas, which I don't care who's doing it. It's just fantastic when that happens. I'm not, I think it's great when other people own it as well. And I love the fact that, these little films are well produced, and you've got music in, it's all very contemporary. It's fantastic. But we'll talk about that shortly. But as I said before, if you want to check her out, and I'm sure Maya will put it in the chat, but have a look at City Girl in Nature. That's your YouTube channel, her YouTube channel. And she has a whole array of films, and we'll talk about that shortly. But let's go back, Kwesia. You were born in southeast London, a bit of a rough area, from what I can gather. Whereabouts was it again? So did you say Deptford or?
Deptford, yeah, Deptford, next to an estate called Pepys Estate. So it's an estate that I grew up next to, and yeah, it's in Lewisham Borough.
Yeah, because it's the sort of place. I mean, I come from London too, and I've known for a long time that it is a bit of a rough area. In your trailer film there, we saw some elements of your past in terms of stuff that went on there. I mean, how difficult was your growing up there?
So for me, I faced a lot of traumatic events within my lifetime prior to my expedition, and that was numerous events. From a young age, I was a young carer, supporting my mother with my grandma that had Parkinson's disease and a lot of Alzheimer's and stuff like that. I was a young carer growing up. I also faced my uncle murdering my auntie through what the masses would call honor killing. And I've lost friends to knife crime and other sorts of violences along the years, friends going to prison. Also the prison to school exclusion pipeline is quite a popular thing within my community. where when people are excluded from school, it's very likely that they will end up in the social justice system, or probably in mental health, or many of these types of institutions. So growing up, I faced a lot of these types of things. Me, myself, I also faced exclusion within school. And I then was homeless at 17 also. So that's some of the events that happened me growing up. Yeah, I hope that answers that question.
So where did nature come into this? I mean, that background is a very unlikely spawning ground for any interest in nature. I mean, you could go either one of two ways. You can go down, basically, or you haul yourself up. And obviously you did the latter. But where did nature come into this?
So as I said in my video as well, opportunity came up through a youth club's center. I was doing some work there with a project I was working with called Black Minds Matter. Black Minds Matter is a organization that builds social change leaders, and I was supporting them in some work. So I was in a youth club in Clapham, in fact, called Keys House, and the British Explorer Society, one of the members had come, staff members, to come and see if there's any young people interested in going on an expedition, which wasn't popular at all for like people, even in that community. No one was interested in. But I interestingly had a passion in the sense of watching David Attenborough shows. I love to like tune into that when I got the space to. So I had a secret love for like nature and outdoorsy stuff, but I never saw myself in that kind of world. I just saw it as, oh, I can watch that and enjoy it, but I wouldn't actively take it upon myself to do anything.
So why didn't you see yourself in that world?
Well, firstly, I feel like one of the most obvious ones is that there's not much representation, especially when you see a lot of outdoorsy kind of things that the people that I would kind of see in the media or see across these things are not people that look like me or are from the type of background that I'm from. So it wasn't appealing to me. As I said, it was something I'd like to watch, but I never saw myself being that person, even making these videos now. I never imagined that until after my expedition,
Okay.
I'd say. And even going on my expedition, getting to the actual jungle was a bit of a struggle because in the sense of having to face like that fear and that kind of, am I going to fit in with these other people? Because there were 60 people on the expedition. And when I went to the practice weekend, like most of them had experience. They're putting up their tents, like they're doing all the stuff. I had never camped before. I was there, I had to sleep in someone else's tent that had space. And I felt like I was in someone else's yard, which like means house. So I was like, they're like a bit uncomfortable. Like I'm in someone else's house right now, even though because it wasn't my tent, and I didn't even know how to even put one up, kind of thing. So yeah, it was that challenge. And then it was only 2 days as well of camping, and also learning skills that we was then going to have to transfer into a 3 weeks expedition in Peru, in the Amazon, in a remote place as well.
Yeah, well, we'll talk about Peru in a minute. I'm really curious about, because the thing is, I mean, my background, I didn't come, I mean, I was born in northwest London, so the polar opposite to where you were. And although there was, trouble around my way, I've had a couple of friends stabbed, one guy died, but I didn't live on an estate. I didn't have, the situation as intensely as you suffered, you lived through. I think my biggest issue was actually racism, I suppose, because I grew up in, I mean, I'm a bit older than you, so I grew up in a time when racism was the order of the day. I mean, I was abused practically every day between the ages of 5 and 15, and then you just get used to it, it's just part of life. But I'm really interested in the whole idea of why people or what people think of the environment, because you said earlier that, this opportunity was given to all of you and your friends and peers, and they didn't want to do it. I'm curious, why do you think they would turn down an opportunity like that? I mean, if someone came to my school and said, "Do you want to go to Peru?" before they finish a sentence, I'd be jumping on the bus. So why?
I think, as I said as well, representation already. I'd also say accessibility in the sense of it's not something that I feel people from my community access as easy to what other peers from other backgrounds might be able to, because the access to nature or sports or that type of stuff is not really in the inner city. Unless you're into it, you then find new ways to connect, kind of thing. But generally speaking, coming from the city, inner city, living in an area where you're mostly focused on stuff like survival, you're thinking about food, you're thinking about not getting, your focus is not at all about the environment, nature, your well-being even is not even at your forefront, I'd say. Coming from my community is a thing also that links into financial background as well. Not many people can even afford to buy the correct kit or buy a tent or do any of that stuff, so it's not appealing because it's like you're already thinking about how you're going to eat dinner and school clothes and that type of stuff, rather than, oh yeah, we're gonna go for a weekend to Lake District or whatever it might be for other people. So I think that's probably the biggest kind of, and also, yeah, like the representation is one of the key ones, I'd say as well, because it doesn't necessarily feel or look like it's a place for young people like me. If I didn't experience what I experienced, I still probably would have had that kind of outlook unless I was given a different opportunity similar, but like even maybe locally, any type of opportunity to do something like that could have sparked that within someone. But just generally speaking, it's not something I'd say people from my community would necessarily be open to. There's fear as well. A lot of people have parents as well that and haven't traveled outside of their area, the country, nothing. So the fear of safety, there's so many like layers to why I can think of why people from my community wouldn't really take up that opportunity. And there's a much more focus on other stuff like music or sports that a lot of my peers have been, I'd say, pushed into or see that as a place of which they fit in. So yeah, I hope that answers that question.
Yeah, it's interesting because there's a number of newspapers or media that is supposedly aimed at the Black Afro-Caribbean African communities, and I've been looking at them over the years, and to me, they often perpetrate these stereotypes because they celebrate people who are in making music like hip hop and stuff like that. They celebrate if you are a basketball player or football. They push people or influence people into the accepted sort of norms of what a Black person should be doing, I feel. I mean, I remember being interviewed by one right in my early days of being the urban birder when I first started, and I was suspicious then. And I said to the journalist, I said, "Listen, I don't trust you." "Oh, don't worry, it's going to be fine, it's all good." And then he wrote the article, and the headline was, David Lindo, Black birdwatcher, lifts the lid on racism in birdwatching, or something like that. And I was thinking, where did that come from? Because that was a narrative that, that's the narrative that they're pushing, which I think feeds the fears that you've just been talking about with your peers. Just out of interest, your community, do you think people, even though they may be afraid of stepping outside of their comfort zone, do you think that, like you, they enjoyed David Attenborough program? Did they have like a little soft spot for nature, but thought, I can't say anything because it ain't cool?
Yeah, definitely. And also I feel even personally, growing up wise, I'm half Jamaican, half Pakistani, but I grew up with my mum who's Jamaican. And I feel that like growing up, we're taught certain things like that's dirty, don't touch that. And so even stuff like foraging wouldn't even be a thing that I would be looking to do, because I'm already been installed from a young age, don't touch that because it's dirty, you're not meant to put that in your mouth, and all these different things that are instilled from a young age. So I feel like these are also part of what you're saying as well. It's a thing where people might be interested even as a young child as well, instinctively, if that's the right word. You want to, like, kids want to like run around, put their fingers in the dirt, do all this stuff, and they connect with nature differently to what probably an older person may, because they're so free with it in a way. And I feel that as a child within my community, speaking from my own perspective as well, you grow up and then there's things obviously you're taught by your parents and within your community, which is seen as not for us or for us kind of thing. And then you're kind of in a space of which you could say you're boxed in a way. You're boxed in to an extent of what you feel is for you and what you feel is not for you. And until you come out of that comfort zone and realize that everything is for you in a way. It's not a specific thing, and it's just finding your own passion and just going for it and being unapologetic about it as well.
Do you think that that feeling that you just described about your community, can that be sort of used to describe people living in inner city areas generally, whether you're white, black, whatever color, creed, race, even gender? Do you think that is it a universal thing, or is it purely just for the sort of ethnically diverse people?
No, I can't necessarily speak for other people, but I can say that I do feel that generally for inner city people, there is a lot of similarities in a way, whether you're black, white, or different, whatever it is. You do face a sense of disconnect with nature in a way, because especially cities built up, there's not, and the hustle bustle of typical city life and city living. So yeah, that's what I can say in that, for that question.
Do you think what sort of things do the people in your community aspire to then? Do you think that, you know, in terms of what they want to do when they, as a career, for example, are they kind of classically wanting to be in music and sport, or was there anyone who had something else going on, but then maybe didn't feel as if they could do it because of, they might be looked upon strangely? For example, when I was younger, I remember I used to work for a PR company, and there was a black girl working there as well. We were the only two black people in there, but she didn't like me. And part of the reason why she didn't like me, I'm not saying she should like me either, but part of the reason that she didn't even talk to me was because I think she felt, because when I was growing up, I was often told, oh, you're white, or you're very English, because I had an interest in birding. Because that wasn't what you're supposed to do as a black person. And this girl, she wouldn't talk to me. And then one day I saw her, she had a Motorhead t-shirt on. She was into heavy metal. I was like, what? And I remember saying to her, I said, I know you're not talking to me, but I think that's amazing that you're into heavy metal, because it's something different. But sometimes people hide that stuff because they're afraid that they're not sort of fitting into the crowd. So was there anyone in your community, that was like you, but in a different way, that had an interest in something that wasn't actually to do with what you were classically supposed to do?
I'm trying to think, like, people-wise. I feel everyone in their own way, like these types of questions, I don't feel I can answer properly because I'm not them, so I can't necessarily tell you.
It's your opinion. It's your opinion.
Yeah. But I feel that I suppose in their own ways, especially now, a lot of people, I could say as well, not everyone's had like most people have faced the similar trauma and stuff growing up, but not everyone has, I'd say, tuned into that or allowed that to kind of deter them from getting further. Some people, for instance, went the academic route. They've gone to uni and they're in other careers, law and stuff like that. So you could say there's people still that are doing that stuff, but I wouldn't necessarily say like out of the ordinary in a sense of like careers wise, what you're said in school, like, oh, this is a career, that's a career. Most people, I'd say, still have gone a career pathway in that sense. I wouldn't say there's a lot of people that are doing anything completely different. I do know one person, he's still doing music, but he's created his own sound with jazz and Afro beats, which is different. No one's done that before. So I could say he's someone that's different as well, because he used to actually make drill music. So there's not much difference, I'd say, with like other than that, but that's the first person I can think to off the top of my head that is doing something completely different to what we're kind of told, if you want to say, or push towards.
I hear that you're a Manchester United fan, so that warms me straight away, even though they're having a terrible time. But you also a great love of music. Tell us about your love of music.
Yeah, so I really love music. In fact, the friend that I'm even actually talking about is actually my favorite artist. To be fair, the fact that he's even doing something way different, which is jazz and Afrobeat fusion, it's really like I really enjoy that music, because for me, music as well brings a sense of healing also, because especially jazz music, it's all raw sounds and it's like authentic. It's not necessarily like drill and stuff is computer based through the sounds. It's deeper. Like I think about vibrations and stuff like that. So yeah, I really enjoy music because it gives me that sense of calmness and just being able to like connect in another way through sound. So
yeah. So tell me about when you first stepped on that plane heading to Peru. What was that like?
well, the plane part wasn't too bad because I've been on a plane before. So I was on the plane. It was quite chill. And I was just trying to get to know like the people around me a bit, because we only had 2 days, as I said before. And my group actually wasn't the group that we got to practice with where most people were. So a new group was being established on the way to the jungle as well. So the plane ride was quite chill. I'd say it was more so because we got 2 planes. We had to go through America. Actually, we did get 2 planes. We got a plane to America and then a plane to Iquitos. So I hear that Iquitos as well, you can only really get there through that way of transportation. If anyone knows if that's right. But I've heard that that's Iquitos is a unique city that you can only get there through plane or boat, apparently. But yeah, we got there, and then we got on 2 boats to get to the part that we was getting to in the rainforest, which took about 9 hours. And I'd say that's where my feelings kind of changed, because on those boats, especially the first one, it was just trees. It was just like trees the whole way and greenery and water. So it wasn't the norm. I've been back home to where I come from in a sense of village or the countryside, which is different, but it's still not the same or anything like going towards the jungle and just passing like so many trees non-stop for like 9 hours. And it's like, that's when I started thinking this is real. Like I'm actually going to the rainforest. And yeah, I feel like that's where it was kicking in a sense. And I had no phone anyway at that point. We didn't have a phone from when we got on the plane. So it was already cards being played from that point anyway. It was already card games getting played. And it was real life connections with people, conversations, learning about other people's experiences of life, and just getting a better understanding about other people's experiences of life and a better understanding of your own as well, I'd say, because that's what I felt. But going into the jungle, there was a lot of nerves. And when we arrived there, it was pitch dark, which was scary because we then had to put up a tent in the pitch dark, and I didn't have experience putting up a tent, and I was then with one other person putting up a tent, which luckily she had experience, so it wasn't too bad. But I had my head torch on, and as soon as I stepped in, there was non-stop sounds. That was the first thing also that I noticed. It was just nothing I've heard before in a way, because it wasn't just the sounds of crickets and mosquitoes. It was like all types of sounds. And then when I woke up in the morning, new sounds of different things. So it was like non-stop sounds, being in the jungle, which was really cool. And when I left, in fact, it was like, where's the sounds gone? And that's when I'm more in tune with what's around me as well, I'd say, because of how in depth it was.
So on this trip, it kind of turned your head, I suppose. It was a big experience for you. I mean, I've been to Peru a couple of times, and I found being in the jungle. I mean, I wasn't hardcore like you. I stayed in a lodge, but even in the lodge, there's things walking around the floor at night, and there's massive moths and things like that. And as much as I am supposed to be a naturalist and all that sort of business, I was a little bit, keep that away from me kind of thing. And I think I'd be very afraid to actually be camping with bullet ants walking around, and the possibility of being dragged out of your tent by a jaguar or something.
That's extreme. That's extreme. One thing for me, I'd say, the fear I had about any wildlife around me was snakes. Snakes was the thing that I was thinking, I don't want to see snakes, but especially because low-key I've been programmed through the films and watching Snakes on the Plane, all these crazy films. I'm like, I don't want to see a snake at all, especially because there's anacondas, there's like coral snakes, there's like all these different types of snakes. So I'm thinking, nope, I don't want to see these snakes, and even tarantulas as well. I said, no, these are the things I don't want to see. But then surprisingly, I saw them, and a sense of that fear just disappeared, because I looked at them and I was thinking, they don't even care I'm here, kind of thing. They're just doing their thing. Like how the whole perception of the fact that that snake wants to kill me is not real in a way. Obviously, in certain circumstances, animals do certain things, but generally being in that environment, I learned so much that everything, because I was swatting moths as well before I went on my expedition. I was stamping on all these little insects and stuff, but having that appreciation when I was there was different, because I was now interested in, why is that like green and massive and hairy, and why does that look like a stick but it's an insect, and like why is that moth got a tiger print on it, and just different things that you wouldn't ever see. There was an interest there, and a thing of a love as well for it. I felt the love there because it was new and it was fresh and it was nothing I had ever experienced before, and it kind of gave me an appreciation to the world around me differently. As I said, I actually one morning woke up with a tarantula in my welly. I did scream because you had your welly just outside the little door bit, and you got to shake your wellies in the morning, and I shook mine and screamed because I saw something starting to crawl up, and the tarantula was about this big as well, and I screamed and everyone was like, what's going on? I was like, it's better. And then they actually took my welly and saw it crawl out, and it was massive. They were like, wow, like that's a big tarantula. But yeah, like that experience did make me understand as well that animals and stuff are probably way more scared of you than you are scared of them.
Yeah, it's interesting because I was in Cleveland, in Ohio a couple of years ago, and I was in a school with Afro American kids, a very poor school. Some of the kids, their main source of food was at school, and they were going back to maybe sometimes a single parent who was on drugs. So it was really hardcore. And it's the first time I'd actually kind of walked into a situation like that, and the kids were great. But
Mm,
I remember one kid, I was chatting to him and I said, what time did you go to bed last night? I don't know why I asked him that, but he said, 3 in the morning. I said, what were you
mm,
doing till 3 in the morning? So I was playing computer games.
mm,
But anyway, we went out for a walk in a park or sort of a wooded park. And I was asking them, do they go out for walks on their own? And one of them said, I would never go to a walk for a walk in the wood. I said, why is that? He said, I might be killed by a deer.
mm.
And I said, deer. I said, are you afraid of dogs? And he said, no, no, no. But a deer might kill me. I said, listen, you got 10,000 times more chance of being killed by a dog than you are by a deer. So it's interesting. I said, why do you have that fear? And he said, oh, because my brother told me. So all this stuff's passed on. It's like hearsay. When you were in Peru, were you the only sort of ethnically diverse person? Were you, or were there other people who were not white, basically? And of the other people in general, did they feel like you did in terms of, this is all new, or did it seem as if they were more kind of experienced than you in that kind of environment?
I'd say out of as I said earlier, there was about 60 of us. I'd say there was 5 of us altogether, I'd say 5. But I was the only one that was like the others were there was one Indian boy and one Arab girl. Maybe there was only 3 of us. Maybe there was only like 3 of us when I think about it, out of the 60 of us. And I'd say everyone definitely did feel a bit of apprehensiveness. Is that the word?
Yeah,
In the way of which not knowing people obviously is new to everyone in that sense. So I do feel everyone did feel that sense of who's these strangers, new people kind of thing. But in the sense of skill set, I'd say probably just over half, or probably more than that. I'd say maybe 75% had experience of some sort of camping or
yeah,
something like that. So I'd say, yeah, majority was a bit experienced. The other ones weren't experienced, but the people that weren't experienced were there with someone they knew. Because like what happens is with the British Explorer Society, they go to places and they pick like 2 people, for instance. So like people within my expedition, some of them had people they knew kind of thing on the expedition. So it wasn't, I'd say, not a much more, because they had a little clique in a way. So yeah, I suppose everyone did have fears, but I don't feel that. I think for me was different as well because of my life experiences, in the sense of I had faced a lot of, and I was even living in a hostel at that time. So I already had lost my auntie and to murder, friends to murder, all these stuff, and being homeless. So my experience was way different to any other young person on that expedition. Like their thoughts were like, oh, what uni am I gonna go to? And and like where are we going on holiday this next year or stuff like that, like, which is cool as well. But their life experiences were they way different to what mine was. So I think that's also maybe why I got chose by the chief leader of that expedition to go to Buckingham Palace to actually receive Duke Explorers Award. And yeah, probably because of the fact that my experiences were way different and just how I was on expedition. I wanted to speak to everyone. I wasn't really cliquey. I was like trying to understand things differently, which was an interesting thing for me, because previously in the academic system, I was kind of seen as a challenge. But on expedition, the same skill set that I was using in school in a way was being praised amongst that kind of environment as well. And that's another thing that I appreciated and learned to appreciate about myself, because before I'd say there was a lot of self-fulfilling prophecies happening with me, where I viewed myself as that kind of, people might say, angry Black girl, or why is your face always like that, or you're too influential amongst your peers, so let's suppress you and stuff like that. So when I was in that environment, I was able to flourish because I was able to help people, listen to people, share my experiences, listen to other people. Like, it was different, like, and that appreciation for myself as well came about, I suppose, from that as well.
Yeah, I mean, you're a survivor, full stop. And I think that surviving instinct kicked in a way that you probably didn't expect to keep you. So was a city girl in nature born after that?
So if I'm honest, it didn't kick off straight after. But what did kick off was my involvement with British Exploring Society. So once I returned from expedition, I think, as I said, the chief leader nominated me, or whatever it was, for this Duke Explorer Award. So they noticed more about my background and my history, I think. And they kind of said, like, they wanted to make some videos with me, and like asked if I could like go to events to help get some funding for British Exploring Society, by sharing my story and just the impact that it's had on me, kind of thing, which I was doing. And then I got opportunities to connect with other people. So that's where last year I got invited to a conference by Belinda Kirk, which actually she has a book out called Adventure Revolution that I feature in as well. And she had a conference called Adventure Mind, and it's like, it had like loads of different outdoorsy people and professionals, etc., and she wanted me to go there and share my story. And this is how City Girl in Nature kind of came about. I went there, as I said, prior to that I had just experienced, in the sense of more safety net with British Exploring Society, I'd say, and I returned back doing stuff I had already been doing, because I was a football coach prior to this. I grew up playing football. You said as well about my thing for football already. So football was my thing, and also the Black Minds Matter thing. So working with young people, I had 2 of those skill sets already in that way. So I was just going back and doing more of that. Last year at the conference, I witnessed that this outdoors and adventure world is massive. Because it was like an overnight stay as well, and I was mind blown, and I was like, okay, I can do much more than just help British Exploring get funding for like more expeditions. That's great already, but what can I personally do? Because I've personally experienced something deep. How can I then transfer this and give this back to my community? Because there's a need for it. And essentially, I look like them, talk like them, I'm relatable, and I want it to be fun. I don't want it to be airy, flary, and like boring. That's why even my episodes of my online series is just that kind of the beginning of what City Girl Nature stands for, and being creative about it as well, because young people nowadays as well, a lot of stuff is visual, even older people, everyone likes visual stuff and stuff like that now, but it's also good to then share knowledge and stuff like that through things that you're watching. So yeah.
How do you actually go about convincing your community that the natural world is amazing and you need to get involved in it?
I'd say it's not even so much convincing now. Before, when I went on expedition, it was convincing when I said to them, I'm going to the Amazon. Some of them even said, where's that? And I was like, Peru, the lungs of the earth. Like, they're like, okay, yeah. But on some, and I said, I'm going to see monkeys. Like, okay. Until now, I've experienced it and I've done it. I think the thing about my community I'd say, because this was me. Seeing someone else do it, like seeing is believing kind of thing. So for me, it's not now convincing. It's just being an example, I'd say. And that's how I do it essentially, because that's the best way to do things when it comes to helping people or trying to get other people to be interested, especially in this day and age where following and stuff is quite a big thing. So it's just about being an example and a positive one, a role model, and just practicing what I preach as well. So upskilling myself so I can then share that with other people kind of thing. And as I said, I think it essentially is that seeing is believing. So now that they've seen that I do this stuff and they can then relate to it and see themselves doing it also. So it's not just, oh, she's done it. And like, oh, I don't think I can do it. It's the fact that I'm real, like they know me, or they can see that I'm actually coming from where I'm coming from. So they're like, yeah, like I can if she can do it, I can do it kind of thing. So yeah, I'd say it's down to that.
That's fantastic. You are, you're a writer, you are a filmmaker, you write spoken word as well. What do you kind of envisage yourself doing in the future in terms of promoting this whole idea of connectivity? Do you want to be? Do you think you'll ever be a presenter on television, for example? Or I know you're already presenting actually on your videos, but would you like to cross over and actually do something on television, for example?
I'd say I would do something on television, but it would be a collab kind of thing. I wouldn't necessarily want to like go on to like present something else, if that makes sense. I would want to present like what I've already established kind of thing. So that's why I'd say it would be like a collab kind of thing, because for me, I think it's so important to stay true to like where I'm coming from and stuff like that. And I always want to share that message through the stuff that I'm doing. So I would put out that I'm open to that, presenting and stuff on TV and stuff. But I think for me, integrity is so important. So I feel like I see like City Girl Nature growing because I've got a productions thing growing in many different ways, which I hope to share with you in the coming months and years. I like to leave things open as well.
Yeah, well, I'm sure you will. I think what's great, what I love about you and other people like you, and by like you, I mean in terms of where you kind of come from. You come from somewhere completely different. You haven't come from a background where you had an uncle that taught you nature and got you interested in birding or biology or whatever, and you come from nowhere. And that's, for me, a very powerful place to come from, because you're bringing something completely different. And I look around me and I see, around me in the whole sort of conservation world, a lot of people who've come. Listen, it's great that they've been to university and they've got their degrees and whatever, but there seems to be a lot of people being churned out who are very similar to everyone else. They're all very similar, and I think that it's so important that there are new voices, and it's a shame. It's a real shame that the powers that be in the media don't actively look for people like you, for example, because you don't fit the identikit. I've been told that myself in terms of what I do. I was told by the head of BBC Two a few years ago, "Oh, David, the reason why you're not on television is because you haven't got a degree. Go away to a university, come back with a degree." And I was thinking, what's that got to do with anything? Because at the end of the day, it's about telling stories. It's about being engaging and having engaging things to say and having a story. You have an amazing story. You come from, a background that you'd never think that, you'd have an interest in nature or have anything to do or any part to play, although all of us have a part to play. So it's really good. Do you find that, do you see barriers? Do you find barriers? Because people often talk about there's a barrier stopping ethnically diverse people from being interested in nature. Do you actually feel that when you go out into the countryside, for example, and you're looking at, stuff and you're walking through a wood or what have you, do you feel barriers or do you feel welcomed?
I feel personally, I feel there is barriers, probably because the fact that stereotypically as well, people see Black people not in the countryside, so there's a kind of like an eye of like, what you doing here kind of thing. And I feel like that it's just a thing of which people, you could say maybe it's ignorance. Maybe it's just ignorance to the fact of which it's just not the norm of which people might see. For me personally, I don't see barriers mainly because of the background I'm coming from and just how I try to look at the world around me. I feel like there probably is barriers for people, generally speaking, but personally, I look at things with different lenses, if that makes sense. I try to look at how I can kind of have an understanding that there is these barriers that people speak about, but how can I then maneuver and do what I want to do, kind of thing. Because as I said before, I feel like it's so important that you like staying true to yourself and kind of keeping it authentic as well. So yeah, I was about to go off on a tangent somewhere else. I'm not sure how to kind of answer.
No. I think because I think it is a difficult question to answer, because I remember last year because this year the fashion is climate change. This year people expect everyone young like yourself to have some kind of action point on climate change. For example, last year it was Black Lives Matter, and last year was interesting because I was getting a lot of people contacting me in the media asking me for my thoughts, and they expected me to be speaking in their minds as everyone else does, who's not white, to have some kind of narrative. And I think that everyone's got a different opinion, regardless of who they are, where they come from, what gender, whatever. Everyone's got different opinions, and that's what makes us humans. We're not all kind of, this group likes this, that group is into that. We're all different. And I think that it's just, when it comes to barriers, there is lots of talk about there's barriers, people, and I'm thinking a lot of those barriers that are in people's minds, because they are told, if you go there, this is going to happen to you, or if you go there. And I travel around the world, I've traveled everywhere, and even here in Spain, I go out birding, I get looked at. And it reminds me when I used to get looked at when I was a kid in London, and I think to myself, why are you looking at me? Apart from the fact I'm a handsome young man, why are you looking at me? And I'm thinking, it's because I got a pair of binoculars, and I'm a Black person with a pair of binoculars, and that's something you haven't seen before. So you're looking. To me, it's the same as being in a bird hide, and I've said this before, but a person comes in full drag, a man comes in full drag, you're going to look at them, you're going to think, what's going on? But then that person will say, oh, anything around? And they'll talk normally, and then you just accept it. And that's what I found. I found that most of the time when you're looked at, it's actually just curiosity. It's the fact that people can't help themselves. They're just looking. I mean, occasionally it is racism, of course, but a lot of the time it's not. And I see myself as an ambassador. And I think from what you say and how you've been sort of living your life, you are an ambassador too, because you've come back from an amazing adventure. And also you've come back from a life that a lot of people would have really suffered heavily, in, and you're bringing something back to your community, which I think is totally and utterly commendable. It's fantastic. And I think the work that you're doing is brilliant. And I've said that online, I'm going to say it publicly, and it's going to be on the internet forever. Brilliant. And I'm telling you, Zoomers, you must check this lady out. Look at her stuff on her work and check her out. It's very, very important. I think that I want to ask you a question. What is your favorite life form?
Favorite life form? This is an interesting one. I was meditating on it recently, but I feel like my favorite life form is an elephant. I'd say elephant. The reason why I'll say elephant is a funny story, but I was told when I was younger about an elephant story and how elephants are quite mystical. I was told once about a story where a guy used to look after elephants, etc., etc., and the guy died. At this point, the elephants weren't around him. But when the guy died, all the elephants traveled from all around the different places and came to the elephant. And also historically, I know about how elephants were actually used for war at one stage. But there's something about elephants that I really like. And even though they're really big, they're really friendly and like warm. So yeah, I'd say elephant.
And if you could be anywhere on, sorry?
So that might change. That might change, but right now it's elephant.
If you could be anywhere on the planet right now, where would you be?
I have to say Scotland, the Highlands. Yeah, I haven't been there yet, but I'm trying to go there. I've been to Glasgow. If you've seen some of my videos, I've been to Glasgow, and that's my experience of Scotland so far, which is city-wise. But it's still vast with nature in Scotland. That's what I love. Even though people say it's freezing and all that stuff and try and deter you from going there, I love Scotland, and I just want to go to the Highlands and experience, even though it's cold there. I'm really up for it, and that's where I would like to go.
You know, it's not so cold in the Highlands sometimes. I've been up there in June and July, and it's been quite warm actually. Zoomers, just to let you know, tomorrow night we have the godfather of bird fairs, Tim Appleton, hastily convened in conservation with, because last week it was announced that Bird Fair, British Bird Watching Fair, was to no longer ever happen. And so tomorrow, Tim and I and everyone else will be talking about the future of bird fairs and bird festivals and what have you. And we'll also be talking about the impact on climate change when it comes to traveling to watch wildlife. So tune in for that one. It's going to be a different format tomorrow, because we're going to have people talking from the get-go. So there's no Q&A at the end, it's just talking the whole way through. And if you feel free if you've got questions. But then we go back to how we normally do things on December the 2nd, when we have a guy called Eric Eaton, and he's written a book on wasps, and we'll be talking about wasps. Watch out for the listings, because there's more people coming. So lots of interesting people coming up in the future. So watch out for that. And if you want to learn about what's coming up sooner, then become a member of the Urban Birder World community. Just go out, check the website, and become a member, and you can have the keys to lots of things. Kwesia, I've been looking forward to this conversation, and I could carry on talking to you for some time, but obviously we've only got about an hour here. So I'd like to thank you on behalf of the Zoomers and everyone else for being here tonight and sharing some of your life history with us.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure speaking with you, and also being in this space with everyone here, even though they're not talking. I really appreciate it. And yeah, sending love always to everyone here.
Fantastic. And everyone here, Zoomers and everyone watching in the future, look after yourselves, and don't forget to keep looking up.